We begin in the desert twilight, where silence is never just silence, but a memory of a man who refused to be erased. And here's the strange irony. Geronimo spent most of his life fighting to protect his homeland, yet he became most famous in the very nation trying to destroy it. And the counterintuitive truth? One of America's most enduring symbols of resistance wasn't a general, a president, or a conqueror. He was a man who had no standing army, no formal state, no fortress. Only loyalty, identity, and a people pushed to the edge. Today, we're not just retelling a biography. We're stepping into a civilization's struggle to preserve legitimacy, cultural integrity, and the collective mindset of a nation under siege. Welcome back to Nations and Notions, where we explore how the rise, fall, and reinvention of nations and the people who shaped them still echo in our political psychology today. As we journey through the life of Geronimo, we're stepping into the world of the Apache nations, resilient desert societies that navigated migration, warfare, colonization, and survival with astonishing adaptability. This isn't just about one man. It's about a world where governance wasn't defined by capitals and constitutions, but by kinship, honor, and the legitimacy of those who earned loyalty through courage. It's a story about crisis and recovery, societal cohesion, and what happens when an entire people confront the machinery of an expanding empire. Today, we followed Geronimo from his childhood among the Bedonkohe band to tragedy, resistance, negotiation, surrender, captivity, and legacy. We explore how Apache social systems worked, how they made decisions, how they defined leadership, and how one man became the embodiment of national resilience. So let's begin together. When we enter the world of the Apache, we step into a decentralized yet fiercely cohesive society, built not on rigid hierarchy, but on earned authority. Leaders weren't born, they were proven. They led by persuasion, diplomacy, and personal reputation. For the Bedonkohe Apache, the band Geronimo was born into around 1829, identity was tied to the land, not in the modern sense of borders, but in the sense of ancestral stewardship. The desert, the mountains, the rivers, they shaped everything. Tactics, architecture, spirituality, and survival. We can almost feel the rhythm of their society. Families formed the core unit. Bands acted like flexible micronations. Leadership was consensus-driven, not authoritarian. Mobility was strategic, an advantage in trade, diplomacy, and conflict. And here's something surprising. Apache trade networks stretched deep into Mexico, the American Southwest, and intertribal alliances. They exchanged hides, horses, weapons, and cultural knowledge. Their world was global long before globalization existed. Geronimo grew up in this ecosystem, one where courage was expected, but wisdom was revered. He wasn't born a chief. He wasn't a hereditary elite. He was simply Goyachle, the one who yawns, a quiet boy who'd one day shake empires. Yet early on we sense a duality, a child of peace being shaped by a land preparing him for war. In 1850, everything fractures. While Geronimo and others were trading in Mexico, soldiers entered their camp and massacred many villagers, including Geronimo's mother, wife, and children. This is the psychological break. This is where personal tragedy becomes political. Geronimo later said, "My heart would ache for revenge, and my faith would feed my body." At this moment, he transforms from a member of a nation to a defender of it. Trauma shapes identity. Loss reshapes legitimacy. And the collective mindset of the Apache begins to channel through him. As we move into Geronimo's years of conflict, we have to understand something crucial. Apache resistance was not chaos, it was strategy. Apache warfare was built on mobility, intelligence, and psychological insight. Small raiding groups could outmaneuver armies 50 times their size. Let's explore the political psychology of Apache warfare. 1. Leadership through merit. Geronimo became a war leader not by appointment, but because warriors chose to follow him. His legitimacy was repeatedly renewed through action, an early form of democratic leadership under extreme pressure. 2. Institutional integrity through tradition. Apache society endured because rules were cultural, not bureaucratic. Their institutions were woven into identity, rituals, kinship, shared memory. This created resilience that paperwork could never replicate. 3. Tactical superiority through environment. They used the land as a shield and a sword. They could vanish into canyons, mislead tracking parties, and strike unpredictably. They built no pyramids, palaces, or temples, but their architectural achievement was the mastery of open space. Despite being branded as savage, Apache raids often followed strict codes: avoid unnecessary killing, protect women and children whenever possible, negotiate when negotiations preserve autonomy. This clashes with stereotypes, but aligns with their deep cultural ethics. Geronimo's psychological evolution. After the Mexican massacre, he becomes renowned for uncanny intuition and what many believed were supernatural abilities, visions, prophetic dreams, and healing powers. Whether literal or metaphorical, they gave him enormous legitimacy. This is where we begin seeing him as both man and myth. The American entry. By the 1860s, the United States occupies large parts of Apache territory. This new empire, fresh from the Civil War, brings settler expansion, new forts, military campaigns, unfamiliar political expectations. The clash isn't just territorial, it's civilizational. The United States government expects central leadership, signed agreements, clear enforcement. Apache society has none of that. A decentralized nation faces a centralized power. Consensus governance confronts bureaucratic hierarchy. It's a mismatch that breeds conflict. But the core issue is legitimacy. How do you negotiate with a nation that denies your right to exist? By the 1870s and 1880s, the story becomes a cycle. Negotiation, broken promises, flight, retaliation, recapture, escape. Each cycle deepens mistrust on all sides. The reservation system. The United States government forces the Apache onto reservations and attempt to centralize and control a highly decentralized people. It's the opposite of their cultural logic. Life on reservations was psychologically devastating. Loss of autonomy, forced agriculture, military supervision, cultural suppression. For a people whose institutional integrity came from movement and kinship networks, confinement wasn't just oppression, it was existential collapse. Geronimo becomes the embodiment of refusal. He escapes multiple times, leading small bands deep into Mexico and across rugged terrain. Every escape becomes a political crisis. Newspapers turn him into a villain. Politicians use him as a symbol of frontier instability. During one campaign, 5,000 U.S. soldiers were assigned to capture fewer than 40 Apache fighters. It's one of the most lopsided military allocations in American history. This imbalance reveals something deeper. A small, cohesive group with unbreakable psychological unity can destabilize far larger institutions struggling with legitimacy and local support. Geronimo's band becomes a kind of mirror. reflecting U.S. insecurities about expansion, governance, and control. Geronimo's surrender, 1886. After decades of running, fighting, and negotiating, Geronimo surrenders to General Nelson Miles. It's a moment layered with emotion, exhaustion, recognition of shifting power, concern for his followers, the heavy weight of survival. But the surrender is not the end. It's the beginning of captivity. After surrender, Geronimo and hundreds of Apache, including allies and rival factions alike, are transported as prisoners of war to Florida, then Alabama, and finally Fort Sill, Oklahoma. For 27 years, it's the longest POW status in U.S. history. Yet another counterintuitive fact. Geronimo, the feared savage, became a public celebrity in American society. The paradox of fame. He appears at the 1904 World's Fair, parades, public exhibitions, even President Theodore Roosevelt's inauguration. Crowds lined up to meet him. Newspapers covered him. Children collected his signature. Why? Because America, even while suppressing him, admired his defiance. He represented the courage it claimed for itself. This paradox raises deep questions about national psychology. Why do nations memorialize the enemies they once feared? Why does resistance become myth once it's safely in the past? How do states repurpose the symbols of those they conquered? Geronimo navigated this with dignity, but also frustration. He converted to Christianity, but continued Apache spiritual practices. He advocated for his people's return to Arizona, but was denied. He farmed, sold crafts, rode in parades, yet remained a prisoner. And yet he persisted with remarkable resilience. He maintained community. He kept teaching Apache traditions. He preserved identity under impossible circumstances. One last counterintuitive insight. Geronimo never held the title of chief. He was a leader, a warrior, a spiritual figure, but not a chief. The US and popular media imposed that label because it fit their expectations. A decentralized nation had to be simplified into a familiar hierarchy. This reveals something crucial. The way we tell history often reflects our own institutional biases more than the reality of the societies we're describing. Geronimo died in 1909, never returning to his homeland, but never forgotten. As we close our journey, we reflect not just on the man, but on what he represents in the broader narrative of national strength, legitimacy, and societal cohesion. Geronimo's story teaches us several enduring lessons. 1. Identity outlasts institutions. Empires rise and fall, boundaries shift, policies change, but identity woven into memory and community can survive even displacement. 2. Legitimacy must be earned, not imposed. Geronimo's authority came from lived experience and moral credibility. When governance ignores the legitimacy of those it rules, conflict becomes inevitable. 3. Resilience is both cultural and psychological. Apache resilience wasn't just tactical, it was emotional. It lived in stories, rituals, kinship, and worldview. 4. Crisis recovery requires more than power. The U.S. government eventually captured Geronimo, but never erased his influence. Control doesn't always create cohesion. 5. Moral choices shape collective memory. Geronimo is remembered not simply for fighting, but for fighting for what he believed was right, the survival, dignity, and autonomy of his people. His story challenges us to reflect on our own societies. How do we treat those who resist authority? What do our national myths reveal about us? How do we rebuild legitimacy after crisis? What does resilience look like today? Geronimo's life is not just a chapter of American or Apache history. It's a case study in political psychology, national identity, and the complicated dance between power and memory. And as we close, we're left with a final thought. Sometimes the greatest empires are shaped not by their generals, but by the people who force them to confront their own stories. Thank you for journeying with us. If you felt this perspective added depth to your understanding of Geronimo and the world that shaped him, we invite you to continue exploring the intersections of history, identity, and collective mindset with us. Until next time, this is Nations and Notions, where we look at the past not as distant memory, but as a living mirror.